Hello, welcome to this webinar series on defending small business cyber assets. This is a series of 5 webinars that I, Prasad Kalyam from University of Missouri, will be teaching with some very excellent cybersecurity expert guests, Jason Drinker from Stronghold Data, Angie Robinson from the Missouri Office of Homeland Security, and I have 2 excellent teaching assistants, Sangji and Roshan, who have helped me put together this webinar series. So this is your teaching team. It's a combination of academics, government, and industry coming to you with, I would say, information that will help you prepare to be strong in this very difficult time of cyber defense we have to do as small businesses and cope with all the threats from cyber attacks that are just getting more and more sophisticated every day. And the webinar series is possible through the Small Business Administration funding, through the CARES Act, and is being hosted by the Missouri SBDC, who are working with us to make small businesses aware of modern cybersecurity threats and also hopefully present the necessary knowledge and skills to help small businesses create plans for cyber defense strategies. And if we have a plan, we have a way to defend against attacks, and hopefully that will help us with increased productivity, cost savings, and reduce cyber risk. And the reason for this webinar series is that a small business today is very technologically advanced compared to any small business ever in the past. We use more and more cloud platforms. We use a lot of networked systems, and experts in a small business also are all not in one location. They're distributed, and so there's a lot of data sharing. There's a lot of resource sharing, and there's a lot of communication that happens for a business to really succeed. And all these things that we need for business to succeed are essentially attack surfaces for an attacker to compromise and create issues for a small business. And we're hoping that this webinar series will help small businesses like this small business I'm showing, Total Sim in Ohio, that has networked resources, distributed expertise, access to the cloud. It's all essential to grow, but also they create these problems of cybersecurity threats that the small business has to somehow defend and still succeed in this world of online commerce. So we start the webinar series, really acknowledging that the adversary is very, very, dangerous and capable, and they're highly organized, and they have significant resources at hand. And how can a small business really understand how to cope with such an adversary who has access to large underground economies, to easily launch attacks, compromise hosts, and steal information that's very valuable for a small business. So how do we go against such an adversary? That's a challenge for a small business. And the attacks also are much more sophisticated, right? So in the olden days, if there was an attack, you would have this flashing warnings that your system is infected and you've been attacked. But the attacks these days are much more stealthy. They go underground, and you cannot tell you've been attacked, and it could happen for several months or years before the attacker finds something that's very, very valuable, and then surprise, you have an attack, and there is the issue of a ransom, or your business is really in a very difficult situation to cope with the consequence of the cyber attack. So we're going to try to explain to you what are the modern cyber attacks in this webinar series. We're going to show you how the hackers find a way, which is unfortunate for all of us, but we have to acknowledge this reality, and we have to figure out how can we really be ready and have a plan to outsmart the adversary, the hacker, at the end of the day, to be in business. And we're going to start by kind of looking back at some of the significant attacks. The Sony hack is definitely the hack of the century as per Fortune. It happened in 2014, and even as of today, we are dealing with the Colonial Pipeline hack, which again, as you can tell, is a new kind of an attack on critical infrastructure that's made our gas prices, kind of climb. It's disruptive. It's something that, we hopefully can stop and or at least mitigate in the future. So understanding what these attacks are in the modern day is very important. And we're going to, in this webinar, give you all of the kind of basics that you need to understand how to process information about cyber attacks, how to think about your small business from a perspective of what are the assets you're trying to protect and what are the threats to those assets, and how are you going to, counter those threats. And ultimately, there's not going to be a perfect solution of security. So you will have to have some amount of risk tolerance, or a residual risk in your business that you can live with and you're comfortable with. So how do you get to that point? So we're going to go through this whole life cycle of really finding out what are your assets that are at risk, right? And what can you do in terms of having countermeasures and an ongoing discipline to keep a plan that will help you if ever you will be attacked. And we kind of start with the premise that a small business is a small business that's going to be attacked, or will be attacked soon, or has been attacked, right? So it's the termite salesman kind of a pitch. So you have to have a plan. So we'll kind of go through all of these as part of this webinar series. And to break it down, we'll start from the beginning. In webinar 1, we will introduce you to some of the emerging trends in cyber attacks. We'll show you what are the common scenarios and help you understand what it means to your small business. And we'll help you figure out where do you start looking at gaps in your small business security strategy to start then building upon a plan. In the second one, we will show you some of the best practices that most businesses can easily adapt, but there are even some more significant best practices to decide what we call as security design principles. And we help you organize them from both the technological standpoint as well as a managerial standpoint. And we'll show you how you can customize it to suit your particular business needs. In the webinar 3, we'll get ready to face the adversary. We will talk about how to set up intrusion detection and how to know what the intruder's behavior looks like to look out for, and how you can actually tell you're under an attack. So what are some of the data-driven techniques that you can use to know that you're actually under attack or there is an incident that needs your attention? And in all these cases, we're going to show you live demonstrations of actual attacks also, right? And defense and ways in which you can actually practice some of the things we're teaching you in these webinars. And in the webinar 4, we'll show you how you can outsmart your adversary by having security controls at different asset levels so that you can, first of all, have proper firewall configurations, have sort of experts ready to help you in case you need to do some vulnerability assessments, and have technology to just authenticate and authorize users and customers in a way that you can protect your assets. So we're going to talk about that in webinar 4, and we'll show you a live demonstration of an actual defense strategy that is active defense, we call it, that you can be on top of the attacker and disincentivize the attacker from launching more attacks on your small business. And in the last webinar, we're going to show you how the risk profile for your business has to be monitored, how it can be assessed and improved on a continual basis. And we're going to take some very state-of-the-art ways in assessing risk, and we'll do some exercises so you can understand how to come up with a risk profile that you're comfortable with, and really understand what it means today, where we're having more hybrid work, we're having people in the local office and remote workers, and we all have crunches on the budget, so we don't want to spend too much money on cybersecurity, so that money could be spent on improving your business. But how do we put in enough money that we can be comfortable with our risk profile and still have also a cybersecurity posture for your company that is going to be helping you defend against these attacks? And so in each of these 5 webinars, we have a very organized way of helping you learn some of the knowledge and skills. We'll have an engagement section at the beginning. We'll help you get some concepts that will be very essential to start thinking deeply. And lots of the experts we have will provide a track of extra input than what we're providing from academia and government also. So you get a comprehensive picture as we deeply think about some of the concepts we're learning in each webinar. And we'll have some worksheets, some exercises that you can put together all that you've learned in the webinar into a real scenario and reflect on it. And we'll close strong. We'll give you some really important takeaway messages at the end of each webinar. So here's a sample of things we will talk about in the webinar. We start with the basics, right, of IT security management. If you're a small business, how do you start finding out what are the assets you want to protect, and how do you want to see these assets being protected if they're threatened, and what sort of techniques can you use as countermeasures against those threats. So we'll kind of talk about these things, but we will make you realize that this is not a one-time thing, but it's an iterative, formal process that is needed to answering some of these questions that seemingly are simple at the face of it, but as you get into it, it's going to be a very formal and iterative process. And in the group discussions, we will let you know, some case studies that are real, right, in terms of some of the cybersecurity planning you need to do. So one example would be like this, where we'll talk about the challenges, benefits in investing in IT security management within a small business, and we'll talk about how small businesses need to be very, very careful, and attackers just need one single weakness. And we call this security by a shoestring, and that's enough to really take down a small business in the online sense, right? So, and also we talk about, not going too far, not getting carried away by cybersecurity at the point where your users feel inconvenienced and they will try to get around all the security you're doing. So we will give you this sort of trade-offs and how to think about them in a very realistic sense. And you'll see some very interesting live demonstrations of actual applications. So here's like a data pipeline for which we'll show you how to create design principles, how to launch an attack, how to defend an attack very cleverly using active defense. So we'll show you like real demonstrations and how to think about risk assessment at the end of the day. If you're given an application like this, where you're bringing in data, you're creating value from the data, and there is a processing pipeline, and there is an entitlement repository that is telling who can look at the data, copy the data, delete the data, update the data, and how these kind of systems, essentially they're in the cloud, can be attacked and how they can be defended against. So you'll see some very exciting demonstrations. And as I said, we'll have some worksheets in each webinar where you will have a sense of bringing it all together of whatever we discussed in a particular webinar. So this is an example from one of the webinars where we're having you think, let's say you have been attacked, how do you react, right? What do you do? And how does that very stressful situation actually look like, right? We'll put you in some of the scenarios and walk you through and try to give you guidance. And in some of the key takeaways, we can build great firewalls, we can build deep moats for our enterprise, we can maybe even hire an invincible army, but to what extent is that all going to help you, right? That's a question. And each of these strategies have weaknesses. There's no one strategy or a combination of strategies that's going to make you perfectly secure. But at the end of the day, we have to also know that too much security hurts your own business, right? It might eat into your budget. It might make your employees feel frustrated working with IT systems. Might make your customers a little bit annoyed working with you. So you have to be really careful in balancing the cost of security and the cost of doing business. And it's a business decision at the end of the day. So we'll help you figure out how to think about the security investments from a usability perspective, a risk tolerance perspective, even some legal perspective. And you'll be able to take away some key findings, hopefully, that will help you as you build your security plan. And this is another key takeaway we have been emphasizing in the webinars that you'll see, where it's good to be part of a social community. You can't go about this alone. So how do you really get help, become part of important networks that can help you keep up to date with cyber attacks and cyber defense solutions, and really share information with other like-minded people and colleagues who can then guide you and also be part of your solution as you create your cybersecurity plans. So with that, I'd like to end and welcome you to watch the 5 webinar series videos that are posted in this channel. And I hope they're useful to you, helpful to you. And I wish you the best of luck with your business and your cybersecurity strategy.